Professor Mackenzie has been lured back from the States many years ago to first work at Cardiff and then was brought to London because he was a pioneer in saying, he was a heretic. People were saying, you're talking crap, you're talking rubbish. Stem cells in cancer? No. Anyway, he's lasted out for 20 years and now everybody's on his coattails and saying, Ian Mackenzie, can you come and help us do research on stem cells in cancer?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say they weren't all with that plight, actually. As Ian said, we've heard a lot about stem cells today. Stem cells are always considered good things. They're great for making tissues, restoring things. You can do lots of nice things with them. But the thing that we've learnt really with time is that although stem cells are good in many circumstances, in others they can be bad. And stem cells actually have now been shown really to be the source of the origins of cancer. They're the driving force to make the cancer grow. They're what makes cancer spread, and they're what makes them resistant to therapy. So I just want to say something about normal tissues before we start, because really cancers and everything else starts in normal tissues. And if you look at a normal tissue, this is a piece of tissue lining of the mouth, and they're the sort of tissues that cancers start in. What's apparent there is that these tissues last you for life, and they're renewing all the time. This whole tissue turns over in about a week. So all the cells down here are busy dividing. They go up, they fall off the top. There's a nice balance in that, and that's how it stays. Unfortunately, that is a very difficult thing for the body to do, and although it's got lots of mechanisms for doing it, this process goes wrong, and you get cancer. Here's the normal tissue growing happily, doing what it's supposed to. Here they're growing too much, they're invading, they're doing. So what is the basis of this change that occurs to give you a cancer? Well, basically, good. If you look at it, we've known now for about 40 years that normal epithelium, the one I showed you before, doesn't do it randomly. That there's a subset of cells in here which we call somatic stem cells or adult stem cells. And what they do is they generate the cells that do the dividing. But these are sort of resting cells, okay? And these last you for life. They're there forever. They're immortal in that sense. And they can divide and divide and divide. So when it goes wrong and we start getting this cancer, which is as we've got here, what's happening in the cancer? Do they still keep these stem cells? Well, it seems pretty obvious to me that that was the case, but a lot of people disagreed. But there's been a lot of work since. When I started doing this, there were probably a few dozen papers concerning cancers and stem cells. Last year, if you look at the literature, there were 4,000 papers on cancer stem cells. There's been an amazing increase in this work. So the cancer itself has stem cells, like the normal tissue. So why is that of any interest? Well, why it's of interest is because although they're present in both tissues, we want to get rid of the stem cells here because they're the cells that are making the cancer grow. And what we found out is that the stem cells have special survival properties. They survive better than the others. And so that gives us a problem when it comes to killing them. So what I'm telling you is that the stem cells that are driving the cancer are actually resistant to therapy. And you can show this. Now, we do a lot of work in the laboratory. We do it in dishes. We put the cancer cells in the dishes and look at them, and that provides a very nice thing. You're going to have to take my word for it because I haven't got time to tell you more. But this sort of cell is the stem cell fraction, and these are the non-stem cells, okay? So what we do with these, we're growing them in a dish, we can look at them, we can count how many cells there are, and we can do something which mimics therapy. We can try and kill the cancer. Well, what we find is if we use the usual sort of things, these guys, the stem cells, hardly respond. It's 2 or 3 cells dead, nearly half, or about a third or more of these are dead. So there's a big difference in the stem cells and the rest of the cancer in terms of how they respond to therapy. You can measure this a bit more accurately. If you take these cells and put them accurately into measurement, you find 34% of them died as a result of treatment with cisplatin, which is one of the common chemotherapies which is used to treat cancer. If you look at the stem cell fraction and do the same, less than 3%. So these cells are 10 times more sensitive to the therapy than those. So if you give them a therapy, these are going to survive and these are not going to. So the analogy I always make for this is your garden lawn, because here we have a dandelion, and we all used to dandelions, no doubt, and you go along with your lawnmower, and there goes your dandelion. But it hasn't, because the regenerative capacity of a dandelion lies in the root and in the stem here. So you go away, and a week or 2 later, back comes your dandelion. Now, the analogy with the tumour is that a tumour's got a similar structure. It's got a stem, you could call it the root if you like, but it really is the stem down here, producing those cells that go up through the epithelium and are lost. So I've just shown you in the previous slide that these cells can be up to 10 times more sensitive to radiation than these. These are resistant. So you give them a dose of X-ray, chemotherapy, or any of the usual things, you kill off these cells, but you may not get these. So what's going to happen? This is where the regenerative capacity for the tumor lies. It's coming back again, unfortunately. So anyway, the real problem that we come to is recurrent. So you treat a tumor in many ways, and it can recur. And that is a major problem because that causes a lot of local damage. But the real problem with tumors, why people mostly die actually from them, is because they spread. They spread from the mouth to the lymph nodes in the neck to the lungs and elsewhere, and it's this spreading that's the problem. Now that creates a problem when you come to stem cells, because one thing about an epithelium, like your skin or your mouth, is that it's really tied together tight. And it's tied together so that it functions as a barrier. So if this is all tied together, how do the stem cells get out in order to spread? How do they go from here to there? That presented a problem for us. And the answer is that when the body is first developing, the very early stages of the embryo, the cells have to make different types of cells, and they have to move from place A to place B. And most of the early embryo is in fact an epithelium like this. And what they do is they undergo this thing called epithelial mesenchymal transition. They change into a different sort of cell in order to let them migrate and go somewhere else. So, does this happen in cancers? Because this would be a cancer way that the cancer cells could get out and scatter. Well, if you just take cancer cells and you put them in a dish and you grow them, you can see that you get two sorts. Okay, one that looks very much like this, sticking together, and these ones that look very much like these. If you let this thing grow up for a bit, here it is growing big, you begin to see that the cells around the edge are doing funny things. They're beginning to escape. Now, we know a lot about the biochemistry of EMT, and there are several markers that are specific for that event. And one of the markers is this molecule called vimentin. So what we've done here is stain a tissue like that for vimentin, and you can see that these cells that are escaping are expressing vimentin. So this EMT process is occurring in cancer, and that's how they begin to spread. Right, now I don't think this is going to work, but we'll give it a try. So this is the sort of model of cancer. This is the cancer where all the cells are stuck together, and these are dividing cells. They're growing. You can see the cancer is growing. But look around it. We've got all these cells moving around, and they're escaping. Can you see this one? Look, escaping from the cancer. Off he goes. There are others here. They're expressing two genes called slug and snail. And I think you can understand why it's called slug and snail, because that's what they're doing. One more time. I think this is really scary, because if you imagine this as being a tumor, this is what's happening around the tumor. You can see these cells escaping and heading off. So that is a real problem. But all of this is happening in the stem cells. Okay. Stem cells. So what's the problem? What have we got to? What have we learned? Well, when I started this business, which was a long time ago, like 35 years ago, I thought that cancer was a bunch of cells that made another bunch of cells and got bigger. Okay? It turns out that that's not the case. If it was the case, you could just get an agent which is toxic for these cells, and you could cure cancer quite readily. What we now know is that within the cancer, there's a bunch of stem cells, and those stem cells are resistant to agent A, so we have to find a new agent, an agent which is lethal for stem cells. And if we
Surgery.
do... True. I don't know why I bother. Okay, so if we can do that, this would work. But nature, you can't fool Mother Nature. Mother Nature is 9 times out of 10 ahead of us, because these guys, if you do something to them, or actually spontaneously by themselves, turn into this other sort of cell, the creeping around cell, which you saw. And when they do, agent A doesn't work on those cells. We know that. So we've got to get another agent, agent B, and then maybe we can take these two. So if we did those, we'd get... Unfortunately, it looks that when the metastasis occurs and it goes to the lymph node, we need a new agent because they changed again. Okay. So what does this mean? It means, I think, that we can have a lot more success in our therapies if we use combined targeted therapies. So we need one for this, one for this, and one for this, and we should get them all. And under those circumstances, the cancer should be cured without the need for surgery, Ian, which would be lovely, with no disfigurement, nothing of the sort. I'm sure we won't get there in terms of your thing. So, in summary, to the point, the growth and spread of cancers are driven by cancer stem cells. I think that's accepted now in the literature. I think that's accepted. It's been very controversial, but I think it's now known. Stem cells are strange. They can change their personality. They can be attached, they can be growing, they can be spreading, they can be crawling, they can be responding to drugs in different ways. So this is the focus. They are variously resistant to many current therapies, and I think that's why half of our patients fail to live 5 years. What is the good news? Well, the good news is that we have a much better idea of why therapies fail, in my opinion, or why many therapies fail. The really good news, I think, is that information about these stem cell properties can enable the development of new effective drugs and strategies. And if we can do that, I think we're going to have a lot more success in treating patients with chemotherapies or the new generation of drugs which are called targeted therapies that target particular pathways. And the really good news is the existence of drugs targeting cancer stem cells has now been demonstrated, and people are getting antibodies ready for clinical use, and I think these targeted antibodies will be available within a few years. I'd like to thank everybody who's helped this out, and of course Saving Faces, Ian's group, who have supported us in this work. Thank you.